All right, welcome to episode 12 of Primary Market Podcast. Today we have another incredible artist that I've been following on Instagram for a long time, and I'm so happy to be connected with Mike Shultis. Mike, take it from hello.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. So many questions. I'm looking forward to having our conversation. But ultimately, I guess the first question, the the objective of Primary Market Podcast is to hear the stories about artists, gallerists, collectors making it in the art world, what the art world is, and so from that lens, can you tell us a little bit about how your artistic journey started as a child, where you're from, where you live now, and then we'll go on to your career.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I grew up in a very
Breaking
creative.
Bad?
Yeah, it put us on the map.
Yo, for
um,
real.
so my parents were both musicians. They were composers and also educators, and so I grew up with a percussionist father and a bassoonist for a mother. And my aunt and uncle were both painters, so I was in a creative bubble growing up. And at the time when I was a kid, I really was like more laser focused on things outside of art. I was a huge soccer player, highly competitive. I was very good, and that kind of was the primary focus of my childhood. But then I started to get interested in graffiti, and that was my only way of sort of rebelling against the sort of creative bubble that I had. It was like the one part of the art world that my parents weren't associated with, or my uncle and aunt were associated with. So graffiti was kind of my gateway into, just studying art in general. It's what I think the best way to put it is I used it to get into a community college because I had flunked out of my first undergrad school because I was lost. And my uncle taught there, and he sort of offered me the opportunity just to study painting, and it took off from there. I quickly abandoned the graffiti side, and was really just focused on painting with a capital P, and that was kind of the sort of humble beginnings of it all.
Okay, so like my ears perked up when you said Albuquerque and graffiti. So like, what are you guys painting on? Who are some of your inspirations? Because when I think of graffiti, I don't know like in your childhood, but back in the day, you think of New York City, the boogie down. You think of at maybe Skid Row. So tell us a little bit about where you were tagging and who you were looking at and all that.
So I was kind of looking at everybody locally in New Mexico, like especially in Albuquerque. There was like a few crews that we were all friends, and there was also beef between certain people that once it got dangerous, I sort of got out of that. But
Wow.
we were doing train yards and billboards, and we were punks, so like we were also doing like places that don't really follow code, because there
Yep.
is like a graffiti code of what and where you can do a tag and where you can't.
Oh,
So and as far as what I was looking at, I happened to live in Germany twice when I was a kid. My dad had a Fulbright for 2 different
wow.
years. And so the second time when I was in Heidelberg, there's this incredible bridge that's world famous for its graffiti murals, and that was really like the first thing that like I clicked with. And so there wasn't a specific artist that I was really laser focused on sort of following in the graffiti world. It was just once I started doing it, it was the people I was around. This one guy Muerte was really cool. I really liked. He actually, to be honest, Muerte was the one that kind of introduced me to painting in general. He was also doing work on canvas. And so I haven't even really thought about that until now, is that was probably the entry into then when I would study in community college.
Wow, that is astonishing. So I, I don't want to harp on graffiti too much, but I love the journey. What you said that some things are like not code, like part of the code. I know you're not supposed to tag over someone else, but what beyond that?
We were tagging over people's stuff. But like there's a couple times where we did it on private property, which is like a big no.
Oh,
We this also included like there's the party life going along with it. So we were inebriated for most of it. So we tagged a church once, which was terrible, and we even felt terrible the next day. So there were. I also tagged a cop car once, but I never felt bad about that. At the time, I thought my tag name was Shiv. Say it again.
No, that's fucking amazing. It's so ballsy.
So my name was Shiv, and I wrote "Shiv happens" on his bumper. And I wish I still had a photo of it, but it was back in the day. It was like 2006, so I had like a Nokia cell phone photo of it, and of course it's gone. Um,
Fuck. That is unbelievable. Um, did you ever? So I lived in New York for a while, and I was friendly with a guy who put up some prolific tags in New York City. He died, but have you ever heard of Rambo?
that name's familiar. I've probably seen the work.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, I don't know. He did. I had an old junk car, and he fucking tagged it the fuck up, and I wish I still had it. But
that's cool.
anywho, okay. So now you're in. So now your uncle gets you into community college, and you're like, all right, shit's getting a little dangerous. There's a little too much heat on the street. Maybe there's an opportunity to create a career for myself with this. What's going through your mind, and like what's happening in the world, and what's happening with you? And I'm listening. I'm just grabbing something.
Yeah, so I was in St. Louis when that's where the community college was, and I was getting caught by my uncle doing tags along the like way to school, and we both lived in the same city, so that's kind of where I was getting pressure from him to just stop. And then, when I was at school, the first year was like super academic and traditional, like it was, just the foundations of, drawing one, drawing two, painting one, design. And then in the second year, they wanted you to just expand and, kind of experiment and do whatever you could to sort of break that. So I was lighting paintings on fire. I was using squeegees and looking at those like Gerhard Richter squeegee paintings. Um,
Yeah.
and and I didn't know there was a life that could be built out of that yet. It's still super abstract. I just know that it's
Pun
something that I
intended.
love and it's something that's like giving me purpose. And then, so the goal was to transfer. That's like the community college that I went to is like, how do
Was
you
it
get
in
to the,
Albuquerque?
it was in St. Louis.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And, and so I was, the goal was to go to the Chicago Art Institute. That's where everybody wanted to go in the Midwest. But I ended up getting the most money to come to Philadelphia and attend the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art, um, which it's the first art school in the country. And I didn't do enough research to sort of understand what I was getting myself into. So I transferred there. I went to Philly, and I wanted to keep burning paintings and like using squeegees and doing weird collage. And instead, I was like sucked right back into like life painting. There was a nude model in every class, and it
Ooh,
was like
you and I.
incredibly like there was not the experimentation I wanted, and I had to be there for another 2.5 years. So I really hated it at first, but I found my people, and we found like a small section of students that were like willing to try to break what PAFA was teaching. And in hindsight, I'm like thrilled that I had the experience that I did. And that was is once I got to PAFA that I really started to understand that there could be a career in this. And I got a sense of I went to New York all the time. I was able to see what was being made and actually in person, and that's where I would say it all sort of clicked that this was something I wanted to commit to for life.
Dude, that is so exciting. And is there any affiliation between Pat and Albert Barnes? I just love the Barnes Museum and him as a collector.
So I bet there was at the founding of the school because it would have been around his era.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if there's a direct like he might have donated money to it at the beginning.
I didn't know if
But
there
I
was
mean,
like a known story or something.
no, not that I'm aware of. But the one cool thing at PAFA is there's this book that they open up that you have to sign when you start going there, and it dates all the way back to like the late 1700s, which is
Yo,
really cool. So you can like go back and see like the most exquisite signatures from back in the day. It's pretty cool.
that is incredible. So, would you say that kind of the rigor and discipline um, that you know, that the school is kind of pounding into you early, like, was important in your journey, or like, what's your take on it now?
Well, so at the time, it was important for me to like try to break away from it while it was happening, and it sort of led me to, I think the type of assemblage I make now. Part of it was a rejection of traditional painting. But in hindsight, I still know how to paint. I can render at will, and
So important.
it's a skill set that I've like started bringing back into my work, more recently. And so in hindsight, I'm really glad I went through it. I hated it at the time, but I wouldn't have done it any other way if you asked me now.
Wow, that is incredible, inspiring. Okay, so you're incredibly inspired, you know, through and seeing a path forward for yourself, um, you know, with a career in art, and you've kind of found your tribe with the people there. So, like, what's going on with your artistic voice at this time, and then, you know, what were the next steps?
Well, so right at the end of like undergrad was, I was still coming from a sports background, so I was sort of navigating this sort of, I never fit in as a jock, but once I was thrown into art school, I definitely was the jock of art school. And so like
Wow.
my like work as a senior was trying to like, pivot from that like, you know, jock background that everybody was sort of categorizing me as. And so I was doing these like really obscene cheerleading paintings that were like grotesque and like hypersexual. And I was like pulling from weird porn off the internet. And
My
they were
browsing
dark.
history.
Oh, sorry, what?
You were pulling from my browsing history.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess I was pulling from everyone's browsing history at that point. But so, I was focused on masculinity, and that's a theme that has really like, been a through point for everything I've done up until now as well. But I was really trying to like play with, sort of deconstructing this like, personality that I didn't really fit into, but felt like I had a connection to. And it was hated by all of my professors. They were so mad at the work. And it was just,
What year was this? What year was this roughly?
so it was 2012.
Okay, so not that long
Yeah.
ago.
No, not too long ago. Yep.
Okay, wow. Um, so what, like, how were you exploring masculinity aside from like, you know, painting hot chicks, hot cheerleaders?
Well, but so I was like, I always think that the artist should hold a mirror to themselves, but also at a three-quarter view. So you see the artist and you see the world they're in. I really
Mm.
think that art should be this reflection of how you see the world and yourself. And so, part of that was, pulling from pornography at the time that, I was looking at, right? So it was like, self critique on that, but also using images that I guess were like almost early memes and transitioning them into like, grotesque, scary pictures, right? Um, and I think that part of how I look at, critique is by showing the darkness, right? Like actually trying to create those pictures so that the viewer is forced to confront it as they're standing in front of it. But at the time as well, I was really interested in using like lots of garish color, lots of like really like appealing textures so that you like kind of like get lured into the piece only to like kind of like snap, sort of see what you're looking at, like a bug trap, right? So that was like for me that was a breakthrough. Like I felt like I'd finally completed a series of work that had a conceptual rigor to it that I really have been building on ever since.
What do you think do you think that there's a war on masculinity in the art world, especially the academic art world? Is there a war on heterosexuality? What was it about the work that, you know, that the art professors were unenthused by?
I don't think there's a war. I think that when Trump came in, like there was like a you know that what's the best way to put it? I do think that heterosexual men in the art world were positioned differently when the Trump administration first took over. I will admit that. And I was at graduate school when that happened, and it was a very interesting time. And I was trying to make work about, sort of that world. And, in terms of hating my work, my work's never been more hated than when I was at grad school. Um, but
Then you
yeah, I
think it's
think
tied
that,
to? You
part
think
of
it's
it
tied to
is,
heterosexuality, Mike? You think it's tied to heterosexuality, or it was?
uh, I think white male heterosexuality.
Was became like villainized.
Well, I think that at the time, I'll sort of jump ahead because so for grad school, I got into Yale in 2017, and
Holy shit!
so that was like a
We're definitely gonna get into that. Sorry.
but so the one thing I know is that if I'd been making non-objective abstract paintings during that time, I would have had a perfectly okay time at grad school. It would have been that like that was the type of work that I could explore that people would have been comfortable with. And it was my decision to work through themes of sort of toxic men that really triggered everyone to think about, what was happening politically at the moment. And I still feel it was important work, but like I'm still sort of recovering from how difficult it was to talk about that work and, to go through that experience because it was rough.
Yeah, I've had conversations with people on this show where, um, the argument is that, hey, it's white straight men that run the art world, and that's why it's okay, to villainize them, uh, in the way that, like, you know, in a way that's not okay to villainize anyone else.
I never felt villainized. I just didn't feel like anyone was sort of willing to engage with my perspective on that. I think that like at the time it felt that, you know, it was the time for me to sort of stay quiet, right? And my work's not quiet. Like it's loud, it's big, it's physical, it takes up space. That was one of the main things that people were coming after me for was how much space my paintings take up because sometimes they stick off the wall 2 feet, right?
Wow.
And so not only is the imagery like all consuming, but also now the physicality of the work's all consuming. Um, but I think it fundamentally comes down to what the role of the art should be, and I'm a firm believer that when things are hard and when things are dark, right, that the work should reflect that. I really believe that. And when I look back in history at like other painters or artists that I like love and think were like pushing the boundaries of artwork, they were showcasing what was happening at that time, and oftentimes it was hard to look at. And so, it's just a moral like stance I took and continue to take.
That's incredible. So let's bring it back to undergrad. Um, you you were getting specific reactions from the cheerleader paintings or other things, like what was that about? And then like, do you think your identity changed a little bit while you were there? Like, did you start to like dress more like an artist, or kind of smoke more cigarettes, or like, I don't know, like adapt some of the behavior that is more stereotypically artistic?
Yeah, so I started smoking cigarettes at community college, and that was definitely a direct, reaction. And I was also on the soccer team at the time, and so it like killed my soccer career there. I mean, I was able to continue playing, but I was not in the right, physical form or physical status. So, and then copious amounts of weed use from community college up until like 2015, like copious amounts. And it was one of those things that I think I started to become dependent on marijuana to like have the energy to like get to work in the studio, which it wasn't initially the issue, but there became this dependency on it that I thought at the time that the marijuana was sort of helping spark more interesting ideas and, opening up a different part of my brain. And now that I don't do that anymore, I completely realized that that was bullshit, right? That, the weed was just giving me energy and it wasn't helping me creatively. I mean, if anything, there was this term that my friend and I came up with called ideas. When we were stoned, we'd think we'd come up with this like amazing plan. We'd execute it, and then the next day we'd realize, oh fuck, that like it was terrible. That was a idea. Like that was not the move.
Been there.
So there's so many like corrections that happen. But yeah, I've never tried to dress like an artist. I've never been like cool, and I also like all of my heroes that I look to when I see how they dress. They all just dress like normal people. Like all of my favorite artists, you would never know they're an artist. They just look normal and wearing normal clothes, and I guess that then becomes its own form of cool. But I never sort of fit in with the look. I fit in with the behavior, and like when I was living in Philly, I snuck into school and lived at school like illegally. I like worked one day a week at a cafe at the school so I could sneak in there and steal sandwiches. And then my friend taught me that you don't need to do laundry. You can just go buy a bag of clothes for $1 at this thrift store down the street. So my friend and I were just going and buying a bag of clothes for $1 and then going to Chinatown to get like the cheapest underwear and socks. And then we just throw it away at the end of the week. So it was like true grime, like true grime. And I was, showering at the sinks at school, and I got caught by the janitor a couple of times, which is like the most awkward. Like you can only imagine. I'm like standing over the sink. But yeah, so I lived, and I still live the life of an artist, but I don't have the look of it. I dress. No one really knows I'm an artist until they meet me.
Dude, that is so profound. So you really are and were bleeding for your art.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the story. Like, back then, like I don't even get it that you were like you found like a little closet to live in. Like, what does that mean? Like you did not even have like a stable home at
So
that time of art school?
there was a sign-in card that cut off at a certain amount of time, but I befriended all the people who worked at the school who were like the security guards. And I got them to look the other way with the sign-in process. So I wouldn't have to because if you don't sign out at the end of the night, they come looking for you in the school. So I found a way to sort of bribe them through kindness that they wouldn't end up looking for me. And then I would just sleep in either a communal studio or sometime. By the time I was a senior, I had my own studio that I could sleep in. You weren't allowed to, but I did.
Yeah. Dude,
It was
that
fun.
is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, and you were just stealing sandwiches and fucking living on like ramen or whatever.
I was living off of those sandwiches. That was the thing. And I had I made a little bit of money each week from the cafe, so I could use that for art materials and stuff like that.
Not for food.
Not for food. I had food covered with the
The
sneaking in at night.
sandwich.
Yeah.
Dude, it's fucking so dope. You are a real one.
It was fun. I mean, my bed, you'll laugh about this. My bed, there was a hospital like 2 doors down from the school, and I found this like chair that turns into a bed that they were throwing away.
The
So I just
dialysis chairs.
yeah,
The
so I just wheeled that
dialysis
over. Yeah. Yeah, so I was sleeping on a dialysis chair for 3 years.
chair.
Yeah.
Yo,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
so incredible. Okay, so now this is getting fucking juicy. The school ends, and you say to yourself, by golly, I want to take this a little further. Or there was a little bit of time in between your MFA and undergrad.
So I had 4 years in between. So my friend, uh, Aaron Fowler, who's one of my best friends and an amazing artist as well. He had an opportunity to do a 2-person show in the Lower East Side with Terry Goldberg Gallery. So he introduced me to him, and I got offered this two-person show with Aaron. So I moved out of school. I found like a studio a couple blocks away, and I made that show.
A
And I was like,
studio
this,
back in Philly, or now you're in New York?
yeah, it was in Chinatown. It was in Philly.
Okay. How
Yeah,
much per month?
300 a month for where I lived, and my studio was like a couple floors above me, and that was 200.
Dude, my dog.
I was living like a king. I mean, I was rolling burritos as a job, making $9 an hour, and I was living like a king.
Yo, $500 a month, sayonara.
I mean, it was great. So I made the show, and I thought this was going to be my big break. And I sold zero paintings. I made no money. But a friend of mine, well, he wasn't a friend yet. He saw the show, and he's like, "Hey, I have this job opportunity in New York. Do you want to take it?" And it was building art crates for Christie's. So I said yes, and I moved up to New York. So, like in 2013, I moved to New York, and I'm there from 2013 until till graduate school. So for about 4 years.
Where did you live? I was there then.
Dude, I was all over the place. So I started in Ridgewood, and I got like a closet for $900 a month. And then that same building opened up this like live work that was incredible. It was like a 600 square foot studio with a bedroom attached to it. And that was $1,200 and incredible. So I got that. And then my roommate, who's an absolute idiot, his uncle said, he was complaining to his uncle that he didn't have a bed. And his uncle said, well, just get a mattress off the street. So this kid dragged a mattress off the street and gave us all bed bugs. And so I had to move out of that apartment. And so I moved to Long Island City. And I was living right next to the Queensbridge projects, which at the time, I bet it's nicer now, but at the time, it was sketchy. It was sketchy. Like, my mom came to visit me there. She was not thrilled about that walk from the F train to where I was living. Um, so then I went to Long Island City, and then I was homeless for a bit. So I moved into my studio in Harlem. So I was in East Harlem, and then I got bed bugs again,
How far
and
up? How far up in East Harlem?
it was 121st and First,
Hey. Yeah, so like
and that
kind
was
of
an
near
incredible
Rayo.
studio. I'm sorry, what?
It's like 10 blocks from Rayo's, like 109th. You know that famous Italian restaurant?
No, I never went. I should have.
Dude, it's lit. But okay, so you got bed bugs again.
Again in the studio, and so I had to move out of my studio, and I found an apartment in Coney Island. So then I lived at Coney Island, and then I was like so fed up with New York. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like this is it's driving me nuts. I mean, I was able to make tons of work, and I was like happy with the progress I was making, but I couldn't do it. So then I applied to grad school, and I got in. So that was my exit from New York.
Okay, and so now tell us about New Haven and Yale and like what the people were like, what your experience was, everything. It's fucking awesome.
So I mean, when I got in, like everything kind of changed for me. I kind of skipped that. You know, I was showing when I was living in New York. I had a solo show in L.A. with Diane Rosenstein. I was in the Bronx Museum biennial, and my work was in the New York Times. I kept thinking that
Wow.
like something was going to
Which
happen,
was to be the big break? Yeah, man. And
and
when you got
nothing.
into Yale, did you fucking think, oh my God, like, I've arrived. This is unbelievable.
Well, so that was the break though. Like, and that's what was like crazy. And I had one collector who'd bought a couple pieces from when I was an undergrad, who started giving me a stipend. Like the second I got into Yale, I was now getting monthly money from him. And then people were cold emailing, interested in work. You know, galleries were coming up to school to check us out. The time I was there, the 2017 to like the 2016 to 2019 era, is one of the most like the students haven't been on a higher pedestal in a long time at that school. Like there are so many people from that group who have careers right now that it's crazy. It was a really
Can you
unique time.
drop some names?
Well, so Emma Webster was there at that time, who is killing it. Felipe Baez was there. Von Span was there. Um, there was, I mean, God, there's so many. In my year, Lauren Quinn was there. Blair Whiteford, Rebecca Ness, Anna Benaroya. Um, there's so many more
Wow.
that I like.
My entire
I could
Instagram
keep
follows.
going.
Yeah, no,
I
I
mean,
get it.
it was a
Wow.
really specific time. Yeah, yeah. So so I was stoked. I came in knowing that like I had this opportunity. I was making money, which I hadn't been from like art sales and everything. So it was great. And then the school, I'm going to speak freely about this. The faculty were not happy with all of us having these opportunities. There's no other way to put it. Like there was definitely this friction because it's not normal. Like grad students shouldn't have these opportunities. It's not how the art world works. It was very unique. So we were getting set up for careers where faculty members didn't have those same opportunities, and there was friction, right? And then there was friction between the students because certain students were blowing up and selling all their work out of their studios, others weren't. But like, so it was really, I mean, it wasn't openly discussed, but it was tense. The school was tense. And and for me, I brought it up earlier, like the work I was making was pissing everyone off, and so I was like creating my own drama on top of all of that, just with the subjects I was taking on. And
And it was selling.
yeah, I was selling, but I also had money, right? So the stipend that I was getting, and I took out even more loans. I was spending a lot of money on what I was making, and you could tell, like I was just dumping money into the studio. And so there was also, that didn't help either. Like they just kept getting bigger and more expensive, and and I was, I felt like at that time, I didn't have a job. I'd been working 50-hour weeks in New York for 4 years. So for me, it was like, this is the time I just have to push it as hard as I can. Um, and in hindsight, I'm really like pleased with the result. I like what I make now all stems from that 2 year experience. Like I really figured it out. Like I figured out my process. I figured out my subject, and once again, I wouldn't have it any other way, even though it was very hard at the time.
Wow. Okay, so like, are there specific studios there? Like, I'm from New Haven, but I don't know enough about the school. So, um, like, how does it work? Do you live in dorms? Like, they give off-campus housing?
So you get a pretty decent studio in the painting building, and then you have to figure out your housing outside. You can do school housing. It's very expensive. There was this specific house that multiple friends of mine who'd gone there before me had lived at, so I knew once I got in, that's the house I wanted to live at. And so I like a week after I got accepted, I got that house,
Oh,
um,
sick.
which is 3 stories. So there's like 3 different apartments you can be a part of. And so yeah, so and it was cheap. It wasn't crazy.
Do you remember what street it was on?
On Dwight Street, it was 188 Dwight.
Oh, okay. What's the cross
It's
street? Let me.
I think God, what's the main street that intersects the art school? It'd be Dwight
Chapel?
and Chapel. Dwight and Chapel.
Whoa. Oh, yo. I know exactly where this is. Super cool. And what years were you living there?
So 17 to 2019.
Okay, cool. So, um, okay, so like as you're creating works and there, and like as people like or as the faculty were getting a little bit tight, or whatever that is, what was like what was the community of students like? like, did you guys hang out a lot? Like, did you guys talk about art, talk about the art world, talk about collectors?
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing that, you know, there were cliques that were formed. It's inevitable. Like there were
Yeah,
small
we're
groups
humans.
that were formed out of that. And, you know, within my group that, you know, my sort of friend group that I was part of, we were definitely talking about like collectors because at that time there were a lot of people who were trying to buy work and flip it like the next year. And we all
Mhm.
had to watch out for that. And we were all kind of, you know, in the same bubble where people were just hitting us up randomly. So that was one thing is like vetting collectors and also vetting certain like galleries and showing opportunities. We were definitely talking about art. I was pretty antisocial. I'm a shy person, and so like I found my little tight knit. But I was trying to work as much as I could. I did not hang out, and that also hurt my overall uh, the way people reacted to me because I didn't hang out much. Like I was just in the studio, and so but Rudy's was the place that everybody goes to. I'm sure you've been to Rudy's.
So
Oh,
I've been to the old Rudy's too.
I never. Where was the old Rudy's?
There was a Rudy's originated like down the street. I don't know the
Okay.
exact cross streets, but like it moved. You know, right around the time that you were there.
Okay. Well, the one that yeah, I mean it was on the edge of Chapel and I forget the other cross street, but the new one is we would go there after the big pit crit. So every week there's like two students who get a big critique from the whole school, and that's usually where you usually they weren't friendly and it was a tough time, and so everybody would get drunk afterwards. Um, and I did not go to those very often. I was just laser focused on working. And and it was at the time I'm glad I did it. I did miss out on some of the good interaction socially, but I will say in my group it got really tough. Like the whole like there's 20 painters in the program, and I mean really people weren't getting along towards the end. I mean there were big rifts of kind of just like you'd splinter off to your group and didn't really communicate between. It was really weird, and it was unique to our group, and I think the group ahead of us was like that too. And I really blame it on the market and the like pressures that were coming down upon us that were kind of unnatural for any you know
Young
time at a grad
emerging.
school. Yeah, it's just, it's not good. I mean, none of us were ready to being offered the opportunities we got. I mean, a lot of us ended up making incredible work with those opportunities, but it's too early, and it was just something that shouldn't have been in the mindset when you're in the studio at that point. There should have been more freedom.
So well, that's interesting. Do you like in navigating the art world, like to what extent is like building were you guys thinking about like building personal brands as an artist, like the extent of the message that you're conveying, like what were the factors that were getting these young artists in school chosen, aside from just being able to say that they had that Yale MFA, that they were just blessed by the program.
I think that the factors were that at the time emerging art was as hot as it's ever going to be, where people were treating it like they were investing in crypto, right? Like that if they put the right at that point, if you had put if you had bought two paintings from every painter in the program in that 3 year period, you would have and then sold it at auction a couple years later, like you would have been you would have made $4 to $5 million, maybe more, right? And it would have only cost you me up to be able to continue pushing the work to like push boundaries, and I'm forever grateful for it. And I also I'm lucky, I don't really make work that can be flipped. Like it's not an easy, my work's not easy to just ship or handle. I mean, they're heavy, they're bulky. So, for the people who invested in me, I knew for a fact they weren't going to try to flip it because it's not, it's not easy. It's not a flat painting. Um, but yeah, I think people were looking for potential, and the Yale MFA kind of like solidified for most collectors that, they'd been, there was a peer review at least to establish that the faculty think this artist is good, right? And, they can trust.
Best. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. It was amazing meeting with you and hearing your story. You really are a fucking real one, and I'm really inspired by you. No doubt. All right, we'll talk soon.